Hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the fourth part or day 4 of this webinar series on setting up a company in China. You have joined us for the webinar session on how to get the most out of your China market entry in the first 3 years. Because the topic for this week is looking at setting up a company in China, we will be reflecting this presentation very much on what it means once you've established your company in China, what really to focus on in that first year of operation. And I've got Manfred who's on here today, who's going to be presenting, but we're going to be co-hosting actually this one, where we're going to be interacting with each other quite a lot in order to make sense of what we're trying to demonstrate with the topic for today. But before we begin today's session, I would just like, well, I know a lot of you that are already on, you've been participating for quite a few days now, but for Manfred's benefit, it would be really nice if you could open up your chat and just type in very quickly, are you a newbie, are you a startup, or are you an experienced China hand?
I would appreciate
how
that.
I define this, how I define that is basically if you're a newbie, it means you found an opportunity for China. You're trying to get an understanding of whether it makes sense to set up a company or not, whether it's a requirement for you to do that or not. There was a question in the registration report about that, and we will be touching on that as well in today's presentation. So if you're a newbie, type in newbie. If you are a startup in China, it means you've already transacted in the Chinese market for maybe 1, 3, 5 years, and you're evaluating certain key trigger points to see whether it makes sense for you to move that step to incorporating your own entity. And then we've got the experienced China hands. So that's basically those of you who probably like Manfred and myself have been doing business in China for over 15 years, already have experience working in or own your own entities in China, and you're just trying to get an evaluation around this. Just a highlight point in April, we are in March. In April, we're going to be touching on a very similar topic again, but for companies that are registered in China, and the cultural implications and communication implications between head offices and China operations. And I've got Manfred coming on, as well as an actual GM who's operating in I forget where he is, in Tianjin? No, he's in...
he's Shanghai based, and
he's Shanghai based.
The sales team is in Shanghai and the entity is in Taicang.
So, you know, come along to that, especially if you do have an entity in China. Even if you don't have an entity yet, it's a great session to join about how communication can be a real big downturn for success for a company.
And it's not just about communication, right? It's the whole bridging the gap topic that we have in that discussion of you have your headquarters here in Europe or in the US, and you've got your key entity in China, and to figure out how what needs to be there in order to work smoothly. Yeah.
All right, so I wasn't going to switch slides until someone wrote something in. Alexander did. Alexander's a startup. Thank you for typing that in, Alex.
Thank you, Alexander.
If anybody else would be not shy, just type it in. Oh, Jessica's been here for all 3 days, I think. Manfred. So she's she highlighted in yesterday's, I think she wrote a bit of everything. Newbie, startup, and experienced China hand. And so that gives a bit of a format. We are 10 people on here today, so it's a smaller group than before. There will be other people that are admitted. But just again, from a technical standpoint, we're using Zoom meetings. I am going to mute you all. Manfred, you'll just have to unmute yourself eventually. I have muted everybody. It's up to you guys whether you want to keep your videos on. I leave that completely up to you. You have the option that we can see you or don't see you. Up to you. With Zoom meetings, again, from a technical standpoint, if anything happens to Manfred or myself, we are both co-hosts to this webinar. So if I drop off, Manfred will continue. If Manfred drops off, I will continue, because we are going to be interacting completely in today's presentation. Basically, if one of us drops off, it will take about 30 seconds, 1 minute for us to reboot and log back into the Zoom meeting. Likewise for yourselves, if you have technical issues, my only recommendation would be to log off, try to log back in, you'll get back in the waiting room and I will admit you back into the meeting, all right? Please use this time wisely. We've allocated 90 minutes of our time spent. Ask any questions, provide any comments you would like. Our promise to you is that we will answer all the questions that pop in. And because Manfred and I are going to be interacting so much in today's presentation, we'll probably be asking each other questions as well, just because it'll be more of a conversational format. I think that's it from a technical standpoint. So just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Christina Kohler-Colucci. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. My focus is 100% on foreign investors that are looking to enter the Chinese market. My brother, who manages our Hong Kong office, has just gotten upset with me that I never mentioned Hong Kong. So I'm going to mention that here today. We operate in both Hong Kong and China, and we help foreign investors get into both of those markets. My brother Sven's focus is on Hong Kong, and my focus is on mainland China. We predominantly focus on solutions around corporate services, corporate compliance, and helping companies to create business models that are flexible, adaptable for the Chinese market. And we've helped over 500 companies with their investment strategies, as well as their implementations into the Chinese market, whether that's through incorporations or just direct contract-based relationships. My focus now is, because we're in a situation in China where it has matured so much, that I am focusing a lot more on advisory. I am focusing a lot more on growing my clients' companies from a financial standpoint, and analyzing that type of business focus. So I will let Manfred introduce himself when we pass over the slides, but what I will be doing right now for those of you that are on, and Manfred, you can do that probably at the same time as me. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Is just give you our contact information so you have it on hand. I'm just going to copy and paste it from the slide. Manfred, perhaps you can also do that and add that into the chat section so that everybody has it. It's not opening up for me. 1 second. No, not working. Why is that not working now? There we go. So Manfred has put in his details. I've put in mine. Again, I will be copying and pasting that again as more people start filtering into our Zoom room. But that is a way to reach out to us. So the purpose of today's presentation is really to look at, you've incorporated a company in China. Now what, right? There's been so much discussion prior to that regarding, the investment, going into the Chinese market, having data at your fingertips to analyze whether making an investment is the right choice. You've probably looked at a variety of trigger points to know, yes, it makes sense to go to China. No, it doesn't, in terms of formulating a company. But then what? Then what are you supposed to do, right? Then your focus really needs to be placed on the growth that you are expecting within the first 3 years of your operation. My rule of thumb is that it does take a minimum of 3 years to break even in the Chinese market, sometimes even a little bit longer. And if you've analyzed your trigger points very carefully, you could even break even sooner, but then there would be a lot more trigger points that you'd have to analyze, because you could be profitable within the first year if you've got the clients on hand and everything is being switched over from the direct transactions you were formulating with your head office all the way through then passing that down to your Chinese entity. So Manfred, geniusly, I think, created an orientation and alignment workshop tool to help companies that are in disagreement about how to move their companies in China forward. And that could be disagreements between the head office and the GM that is sitting in China. It could be disagreements amongst the investors, whatever that might be. It's bringing those decision makers onto a workshop to analyze in which direction you want to go into. And ideally, you want to do this workshop prior to establishing your company so that the minute that that company is established, it's a go, right? I've been watching a lot this series right now on Formula One, and it's like when the lights turn off, the engines roar and you shoot off, right, into the distance. But just like in Formula One, there are curves and crashes and obstacles that always pop in the way, competitors that start hitting you and whatnot. We want to try and avoid that. And I think the beauty of this workshop tool is you are having a concrete and interesting discussion with the decision makers, with independent parties that are trying to place focus on the future and the goal of where you want to go. So I'm going to start off with today's presentation, starting off before Manfred gets on, about, your China project has been greenlit, right? You are raring to go. And since November 2020, I've seen a tremendous increase in the amount of companies that are greenlit and are ready to get going. And then suddenly I don't hear from them anymore. So I get an email saying, Christina, project is go, greenlit. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, all right, here's what you have to do now. And then I don't hear from them, right? So what are the obstacles then that are getting in their way, right? And I want to highlight from my perspective what I'm seeing amongst the companies that I'm talking to, why they're not moving forward, even just simply with incorporating their company in China, okay? So it's the problems from strategy to execution, all right? So the first dilemma that I'm seeing is different opinions on strategy direction, okay? And that can mean a variety of things. It can mean, yeah, we've greenlit the project, but really, do we have to set up an entity? Could we not just continue to use the distributor until we hit a certain volume or value in the business? And then the other decision maker says, well, no, I want to take control. I want to take control of the business, and I want to be able to have a multitude of channels in order to increase that growth. So there's this difference of opinions on strategy direction, right? And one party is emailing me saying, greenlit, ready to set up company. And the other party's like, no. I still want to use our distributor first before, maybe for another 6 months before we move forward, all right? So this difference of opinions becomes a roadblock. It becomes an obstacle. The other is a fear to make a decision. And actually, this is a case that Manfred and I have collaborated on, where he's recruited a GM for the Chinese market. And there's a guy that's sitting in China without an entity. And now, the idea was you hire the GM. Once he's on board through an employer of record service, you start the incorporation phase. And now the issue is, how do you move forward to that? Ladies and gentlemen, apologies. I've got my daughter who's sick at home. Can you just go, please? Thank you. Go. Okay, you can stay a little bit. Apologies for that. She has a bit of a cold.
No worries.
So you have clients that have this fear to make a decision in terms of, now we've got someone on board, and now we're hesitant about setting up that company. It makes such a bad image to that GM. In this situation, also, what we've seen, both Manfred and I, is that the headquarters is putting all the decision-making now on this new GM that has just started with the company, no real onboarding process yet, and the decisions have to go on to him. So this,
and that is something, Christine, if I showed you, mate, that is something where I think both Christina and me have very strong beliefs and opinions on this topic. At the end of the day, it needs to be balanced. It doesn't make sense if China is not allowed to say anything. It also doesn't make sense if China is allowed to, determine everything. There needs to be a balance in it. You need to build a bridge in one way or the other. And that's what needs to be there. Otherwise, it will not work on the long run, because we've seen enough failures along our way.
Correct. And it also doesn't, if the GM is seeing that, on one level, the GM is probably thinking, great, I can make all of these decisions and I can speed up the process and I can move forward. First mistake, all blame will go on him. And this is something that in the Western world, we love to blame people. We love to put all of the decisions on someone and blame that person if everything is going wrong. That's wrong. It's, you know, the blame has to be a two-way street as well, and cannot be just put on. My belief is actually stop blaming. Let's sort out the solution and then move forward with the growth. Yeah. The next issue that I'm seeing is misunderstanding of how the legal system works in China. And this is already with people that are, if you join our Monday presentation, I was going through the 9 key considerations or decisions that have to be made as you're incorporating your company in China. One of them is related to the corporate management. So who is going to take the roles either as executive director, board of directors, legal rep, GM, and whatnot. Get advisory on that. If there are certain aspects of these key decisions where you can't make a decision because you just don't know, fair enough that you don't know, but then go to a provider that can give you that assistance so that you can make a clear decision on how to move forward. I have one company right now, nobody's willing to take the legal representative role. So as a consequence, they can't set up their company. And I'm pushing to get on the phone with them to say, guys, you don't have to worry. There doesn't have to be a fear in relation to taking these roles. As long as you know what the responsibilities are, what the risks are, you can make a weighed decision on who should take that on. And it's not a permanent role. You can also switch it over every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, as you wish. But that's now a roadblock for them where they're not moving forward with their company establishment. So talk to lawyers, talk to advisors, talk to a variety of people to understand what you don't know to eliminate the fear so that doesn't become a roadblock in moving forward and progressing. The other is the reliance on exclusive partner. And this is just, again, a case with a company I've been working with for the last 14 to 16 months, where they've signed a licensing agreement with a partner that has just simply not reached any results. I mean, zero. No KPIs have been achieved. And there is this reliance on them to separate, to move away and either take control and find other partners, or actually realize that they would be better off doing it themselves. So I understand that because with border controls, we can't travel to China, and obviously we would feel much better if we could meet people face to face and have these types of negotiations with other partners or whatever that might be. We have to deal with what's been given to us. But now this company is 16 years down the line with the same 16 months down the line with the same partner that has achieved 0 results. They've lost 16 months of time where they could have been achieving revenue. And that's just because of the fear of not being able to exit that relationship. And again, like I said, either go it on their own and set up on their own, or spread their wings and use other partners.
I think we chatted about that also up front, Christina, right? Is that at the end of the day, especially when you go into China, and as I understand, most of the people here are rather kind of on the go or have started that path. Then it's important to look at things that don't work and to readjust. If we
readjust quickly,
go in this very, very slow Central European way of planning an awful long time and then executing and then seeing that things don't work and then kind of still sticking with things that don't work, then it's the natural result is you lose 3 years right away. And sometimes depending on what you are doing and where you're doing, one of the funny things with China is that to me, it always seems that these windows of opportunity, they are kind of they're narrower. I'm not to say, you can always enter the Chinese market, but it's just, if you're, 7 years late or 7 years later than your key competitors, then the situation is a very, very different one. And you'll just find it very hard to grab market share. And I think Christina also agrees in this one, it's just the speed with which China is moving normally tends to be faster than with which Austria, Germany, UK, Italy is moving. And we need to, take that into consideration. So look at it, analyze, change until it works.
Right. And I think with COVID, I certainly have learned you know, with crises, but even, you know, COVID was a crisis, right? There are even smaller issues where you have to pivot your organization. You have to react very quickly to the market conditions and just pivot. And reaction time is critical. Don't just dilly-daddle and wait,
And you know,
because that brings you nothing.
As a matter of fact, Christina, I believe that COVID has given us actually quite a good chance on this one, because it used to be in the past that, you know, those responsible for China, they fly out to China. If it's a lot, maybe 6 times a year or 8 times a year. If it's more normal, then it's like 2 to 4 times a year or just 1 time. And then, you know, the local team is kind of, you know, keeping things and piling them up until that European decision maker is there. Now we all understand that either you go through quarantine, which most of us don't want to, or you know, you have to kind of establish a communication routine. And I think this, in that terms of speed, is actually a chance, because, you know, you need to be in touch with your team over there. So, you know, do it on Zoom, do it on Teams, do it on WeChat, whatnot, whatever you prefer, but do it. And then you also have a chance to think about it if the kind of that update routine is a week and not just 3 months, because then just, you know, sleep on it, and the next week at latest you take a decision and try to make a change. Because that's normally also what's really, you know, frustrating for the local team in China. They see what would need to be done, but nobody's moving. And that is a bit of a well,
it's disappointing and frustrating. Yeah. Another is different goal objectives with investors. And I wanted to highlight this because, again, it's become something much more common last year with COVID, that companies in China, foreign companies in China, are looking for additional investors. And it's coming either from China, Chinese investors, or even from APAC. And in yesterday's presentation, we were talking about the joint venture infection. And one of the things highlighted was obviously that whenever you have investors, you have to be in alignment with each other. Otherwise, and that's the same whether you're just financially contributing to a company, or whether you're actually going to be involved in the operations of the company, or you're an investor that's bringing in IP, or whatever it might be. You have to think in terms of a win-win situation. And one of the biggest failures that we discovered in yesterday's presentation was obviously the fact that when the investors are not in alignment and you don't have the right objective and goal ahead of you, that's only going to bring you down. So when you are thinking about having investors, obtaining investors, or going the route of a joint venture partnership, or even just negotiating contracts with licensees, with distributors, or with whomever, you have to have clear guidelines and responsibility guidelines to know in which way this company is moving forward. How are you moving forward? And that, again, is all about communication and having that line open to discuss, especially if you're not happy with something. Manfred, I don't know if you want to add something on that.
Absolutely. I think, you know, it's again, is alignment. Alignment is even more important than within the team, because most of us have either experienced stories with investors that ended sadly, or have seen friends kind of being in part of that. And it's already tricky when you're, you know, Munich-based or London-based, when the community is here. But what we always need to keep in mind with this China thing is, like, we've got a distance of 8,000 kilometers. Plus, most likely, you then have a local investor. They see different things. They have different ideas. They want to move in different directions. And, you know, even if all of those things are not there, what's normally there is they are, you know, very opportunity driven. So they have a tea with somebody and they see an opportunity and they would like to capture on that relationship and use that opportunity. And this is, I guess, where you need to fine tune. Otherwise, it's tricky for the relationship to actually maintain it and for the investment to work out. That'd be my experience.
All right, so in that case, I mean, that was just an introduction to show you the problem that we're seeing in regards, again, to go from strategy to actual execution of the company establishment in China and moving forward with that. So Manfred, why don't you share your slides in relation to the actual workshop tool, the Kingmaker way?
Absolutely. So just as Christina pointed out, I'll do a very short, or at least I try to do a short introduction of myself. So similar to Christina, my China journey started back in 2003 in northeastern China in Qiqihar, which is close to the Russian border, where we had to show perseverance with minus 35 degrees in winter. Starting from there, I did a lot of work in project management, going up to 100 million euros for a couple of European organizations, doing a lot of firefighting on the ground, speaking Chinese, speaking fluent Chinese, speaking Chinese, and actually reading Chinese contracts and telling Chinese clients, yes, you wish, but actually that's not what the contract says, is something that helped me along the way. Yeah, then, you know, we had to change course a little bit and got into recruitment. And this is what we do these days, a combination of recruitment, of executive search positions, of mid-market positions, plus also, and this is, I guess, why Christina is having me here, is supporting the organizations, not just from the point where they say, now we know who we need, but more from the point where they say, we believe that China is a huge market, but we are not clear on how to get there. So it's quite often, you know, when we start reaching out to customers, or they come to us, or they come to Christina and Christina sends them to me, or whatever way, they're in this state where they say, well, we believe and we have some data that, you know, it really makes sense to enter the Chinese market. However, how do we take it from there? And I guess this is why we had to come up with something, which is this quick strategy workshop that we have developed, where we say, look, especially when you haven't started, especially when there's different people involved, be that different perspectives from the ownership to the management, be that different perspective within the organization where sales is thinking this way and production is thinking that way, or maybe you have somebody who is rather younger on the marketing side and then maybe more mature people in the management team, you know, you'll have different perspectives, you'll have different ideas. And I guess one thing is to really, you know, take these things and channel them and try and also use our experience and say, look, just because it's different does not necessarily mean it's bad. You know, we all understand these days that China and digital is something that goes hand in hand. Hence this importance of WeChat. So, you know, if somebody's coming along and saying we need to pay attention to digital, that is true. And, you know, at the same time, you can have a more mature or a more conservative approach towards the numbers. That is true as well. What we do in these workshops really is to channel the opinions and to move in one direction. So let's look at this slide kind of for starters. Normally what we see is that there's different needs from the Chinese local market versus the headquarters. On the left-hand side, you'll see the local market's needs, and on the right-hand side, you see HQ. So the Chinese local market, you know, you've got to be fast, you've got to be flexible. You make an offer, you know, you can't just change things all the time. There needs to be trust. There needs to be perseverance in negotiations. You don't just go start something and then you say, well, all is fine, and you know that partner is gonna run off. Especially if you start, I guess, you know, that's, I think, also what Christina pointed out with that other GM that we had put in place for a client. The people or the behaviors will be results of the first impressions, will be results of what you do. If you come to China and there's a lot of euros hanging out your pockets, somebody will take them. And that's the kind of message that you send, you know, if you don't take things step by step, if you don't communicate a lot, if you don't stick to it, if you don't, you know, look at what is in the contract and what are they actually doing. if you don't set, if you don't set consequences. And that is something that we just, especially in entering, this is where I fully subscribe to Christina's ideas, talk to the experienced ones, be that external consultants, be that friends, be that business contacts that you have known about. Talk to them, see what worked for them, and kind of pick those things that seem to make a lot of sense for you or that apply to you. Just invite somebody for lunch. These days, maybe virtual lunch, depending on the country that you're based in, is, a lot cheaper than, doing a kind of very, very elaborate marketing study for 20,000 euros, which very often is not, is not necessary. But so taking all these things that the local market needs, on the other hand side, for HQ, what we would love to have is, we know how the revenues in China develop for the next 3 years. And we'd love to have the certainty that they develop in this way. Also, a lot of the HQs, and obviously most of them don't admit it, but a lot of the HQs, they would love to have information about China. And again, that is something, if you think a little bit ahead, you just put the right systems in place that you have the information. If you set up direct sales, then you get these people to use the CRM. If they don't want to use it, they get less of their bonus. With these kind of small and simple steps, you ensure that you have information, because then you're not blind. And when you're not blind, you can also actually evaluate your strategy. You look at stuff and say, well, we started this way, but let's look at all the people that, we tried to get business with, and none of that worked. But here is another market segment we never were looking at, but actually that one is exploding. And that, makes it also easier from the distance of 8,000 kilometers to simply act and react. I think you need data. If you start in a way where you say, this is James, and James is going to be doing everything. We only want to talk with James once in 3 months. And it doesn't matter if that's what you say. If you have a regular monthly update call, which you cancel most of the time because of other important things, then this is the reality. This is reality resulting from that. You have an update call with James once in 3 months. That's not a strategic market, honestly. If that is the case, then, I beg to consider if you should be in China at all. Then maybe it's better to go into Central European markets that are closer to you.
So, just one point on that, Manfred, that I want to highlight is that, when Manfred is giving that example, that's the reality. I just want to highlight that. There are situations where companies invest so much in the pre-investment stage in terms of trying to make sure they set everything up perfectly, which is not achievable in China, by the way. And then once the company is actually established, they forget about it. And they haven't even appointed people within the headquarters to start that communication. That really does happen. Which is why, again, we are trying to highlight this problem in order that people then can avoid it by having the open dialogue, by making sure, once a month is not enough for me. Once a week, at a bare minimum, should you be getting in touch with your China operation?
Especially if you start it up.
Especially if you start it up.
And also, especially if it is already a strategic market, right? Meaning it's doing more than 20% of your global revenue.
So this is a key point. Also, I want to re-emphasize. Manfred has said it now a few times, and I don't know if I've caught it on. He's highlighted, is China a strategic market for you? Because everybody thinks it is. But then when it comes down to the execution, that's not what they are showing. That it is strategic and that it is important.
Exactly. And that is the key thing here, really. It's, it's just easier for our folks in Europe to focus on the US market. I've been there in holidays. I loved it. I traveled. I did this. Maybe I even studied in the US.
I understand their accent.
I understand.
I can speak to them.
I think they're funny. It's all those small things that when you are not extremely mature, when you're not in senior management, what it boils down to, you know,
Right.
when you get somebody who is whatever, who is, you know, end of their 20s, beginning of their 30s, and you make them project management and so on and so forth. That's kind of what it will boil down to, if they will do a lot of communication or not so much. We're all people, right? So I like Christina, I like to work with her. So if she sends me something, of course, I'll be very quick to reply. I like her. If that, however, is somebody from a country that I don't really get along well with, and I know I don't like the person, and there's always misunderstandings and everything's complicated, then my behavior will change. Mm-hmm. And I guess what Christina and me are saying is, we know the elements, we see the patterns, and as many of you might be shaking heads out there and saying, no, I can't even imagine. Oh, that's what it is. And those are the issues. They're very simple issues and very simple to fix. But, you know, somebody needs to take that serious.
I just want to highlight something. I've had now, since January, quite a few Chinese speakers join the webinar series. And I've gotten feedback saying that some attendees have a lot of trouble understanding the English of the Chinese speakers. Mm. And I've done that strategically, because when I get an email like that, then I know that this company is not ready for China, because you're not going to be working with Westerners like Manfred and I that are fluent in English, and English is either our mother tongue or second tongue. You're going to be predominantly working with Chinese people whose English is maybe their second language at best, or maybe their third. And you know, there will be communication issues. It's obvious that there will be accent issues, but you've got to be open to that dialogue, and be flexible to it, and realize you've got to adapt to it, because these are smart people on the ground. And just because you can't, you know, understand their accent doesn't mean that they're not doing their job good enough. You've got to be able to open yourself up to that dialogue.
That is extremely crucial. I mean, just one thing, you know, that Christina, you had pointed that out a couple of weeks ago when we talked, where you had to do an audit of a finance person, where the impression in HQ was she's really bad, whereas it really came down to her spoken English wasn't good enough. Her written English was perfect, you know. Most of Chinese people written English is better than the Central European folks who are not English native speakers. At least that's my experience and my understanding. Mm. For the spoken one, yeah, it normally is an issue. It normally is an issue. But as Christina said, you know, we need to embrace these differences that are there. We can moan about it, you know. Sometimes maybe we even have to bitch about it. But in general, unless we embrace them, it just will get a bit tricky to actually also move ahead on the market. Because yes, at the end of the day, we have to accept it. They're different.
Yes.
But not in a bad way.
And I just want to highlight that all of these points in terms of what do we need in China and what does the HQ need at home, all of these points are related to communication. It's all related to the dialogue between China and HQ.
And where you, sorry, Christine.
Go ahead, Manfred.
And where you see really a very, very direct overlap is on the trust. And the best thing that you actually can do to make sure that, you know, when you picture this whole thing as a bridge, trust is a pillar here and trust is a pillar there.
Correct.
And the best thing that you can do to keep these kind of pillars high and strong is communication. And even if it's, you know, not the nicest way of communication, and even if it's loud disagreements and so on and so forth, but it's communication. You know, you're in touch. You can feel the pulse. You see what's going on. There might be disagreements. Well, you know, fair enough. It is what it is. But you need to be talking with each other. And I think this is something that is, again, you know, there are patterns. So there is certain information that you want to have. You will want to have financial information. If you're doing sales, if you do direct sales, you'll want to have information about how many visits are your people doing, whom they're talking to. If you're working with, you know, partners and you're doing indirect sales, you also want to have some information from them. You know, where do they see the trends going? Where do they see? So it's always the same kind of information that you're really looking for in order to be happy.
Mm.
And so really, I guess part of the simplicity and part of the difference between those that fail and those that work is to think about it that way. What kind of information do I need? And then try to establish ways that the information flows automatically. You know, it's extremely difficult if all the time you need something, you need to call somebody and say, can you give me this? Then you have 8,000 kilometers. Then maybe you're using the term A, the other person is using the term B. So it's not clear what you actually want. Then you get something, then you feel they don't understand you. And then, you know, you start creating this downward spiral. What you really want to have is to start from here and then create an upward spiral, because wow, there's a success here, there's a success there, we can move this way, we have an opportunity there. But for that, you know, you need to use that momentum when you start working with people. I mean, our core business is recruitment. So, you know, obviously when you apply for a job, you're motivated for it. What we then see as the number one pitfall, and again, an extremely obvious one, is companies just waiting. So I've got an interesting applicant sitting in there and we'll just wait. And I've got 2 interesting applicants sitting in there. What we do, oh, you know, we wait some more. And then we've got 3. What we do, we wait because now the calendars are blocked for the next 3 weeks, and maybe in 4 weeks we can do something. I know that's the reality. However, you know, it's also very easily to understand that somebody applied for a job. Maybe it's even the general manager or the head of sales of a very important job. So, you know, capture that momentum. Start communicating with them quickly. Even if you say, look, apologies, you know, it took a while and now calendars are blocked, but, you know, I want to start communicating with you, and in 2 weeks' time, then we have an interview slot, you know, give it a positive spin, get moving. And then also when you want to work with that person, get them on board. You know, don't even think about waiting for 6 months. Use that momentum and then try and spiral up and gather ideas from, you know, whoever is doing a good job in your industry, in your product field, in your market segment. I think that's about it, right?
Yep.
Let's look a bit at I think we can spend a lot more time on the differences and what's needed. But let's look a little bit at the rest of the slides that I've kind of brought, and just to highlight it really. So again, we've pointed out that there's a couple of alignment topics. Can be small, can be big. What happens with these alignment topics is you see frustration with the team because somebody wants to move ahead, but the others he feels that they're holding him back or her. And that can be different, you know, it can be the operational team that wants to be faster than the management or the owners, or it's the owners who've already told the management team a couple of times they need to start looking at China. So there's different levels. However, when you sense that kind of stuff, that is definitely right to talk to Christina or me to get one of those workshops booked. What we do is also very simple. We simply say whether we are at the moment. At the moment, it could be a blank page. It could be that we know that China is a big market, or it could be we believe that China is a big market. It could as well be that, you know, we're already doing 2 million euros of revenue in China. And then where we see a lot of, again, the beauty kind of developing in the workshop is not just to look at issues we have and to say, how can we solve them? No, we do not believe in that kind of reactionary thinking and behavior. What we look at is, where do we want to be 3 years down the line? And that is something that changes the perspective completely. Once we talk about 3 years down the line, a lot of people get creative. A lot of people start seeing, oh, wow, this could be really interesting. This could really be something. And then, you know, a part of the alignment, in all fairness, is really already happening there because people start dreaming together. You start to develop a vision that is just strong enough, sexy enough to actually move towards that vision. You know, you want that. We want a strong position in the marketplace. We want to be one of the top 3 players in this field. We want to have China have a global market share of, and so on and so forth. And then we break it down, because we see two things that kind of are not happening, which is in line with Christina said. On one hand side, it's more like I have a financial plan for next year, which is so detailed that the local team is really handcuffed. They can't do anything. If they, as soon as they leave budget a little bit, they're hanged and quartered. That is one issue. The other issue as well is, to say, look a little bit ahead and also think about what do we need to do now in order to implement it. And so once we have that picture of where we really would like to go, we do three important or equally important things. We look at, what's holding us back. We look at the chances, and then we start breaking it down. And what we see there really is the same thing that's always the case. When you've done something over and over and over again, like riding the bicycle, you don't need to think about it too much. You just hop on and you ride it. If it's raining a lot, you ride it differently than, if it's winter or it's summer, and you just have it because we've done it for such a long time. And this is kind of what we see here a lot when we do that, is there's uncertainty, there's fear. What is maybe quite easy for Christina or me to say, you set up the company, you put in the advisory, then you put in a board of directors, and then you move, and then you do this, and then you go and speak with the market, you move ahead, and so on and so forth. That, for some of the people we speak to, is all like writing in hieroglyphs, is all, very hard to grasp, which is understandable. Maybe they've never been to China. Maybe they've only heard about the stories that people nick their product designs or nick their technology or whatnot. And so this is where, apart from the alignment that we go in one direction, we also bring in kind of, so to speak, a simplicity where we say, look, it's these steps, and then it's those steps, and then it's those steps. And that's, again, it's an offer, it's a buffet. If people then want to, we move on with an action map where we simply, go ahead and actually detail things out. Could be on a yearly basis, could be on a 3-year basis, depending on the client. But again, I hold personally a very strong belief that if you want to, move ahead in that strategic market, China, you need clarity to, see where you are. And if you want to grow quickly, you need simplicity, because if every process is just very complex, how will you be able to scale? The answer is simply, you won't. You will not.
So I just want to add something here, because a lot of people might be thinking, oh, well, this is like creating your business plan for China, and creating a 3-year business plan ahead of time. It is. The difference, though, with doing this with somebody, for example, like Manfred, is the fact that you have an independent person who has over 15 years of on-the-ground experience, who has been fighting fires. So it's going through and creating an action roadmap by, first of all, analyzing the market potential, analyzing the obstacles that exist, analyzing the challenges, analyzing what you're actually good at, looking at the goals you want to achieve, which can be everything from a numbers game to a head count to whatever you're looking at, but actually having somebody independent giving you that advisory on top of going through this business plan. And making it a real focus that you're looking into the future. You're not looking months to months to months to months to month, right? You're looking years down the line as to where you want to be. So I wanted to highlight that point, because you can create a business plan. Everybody can create a business plan internally. The issue is knowing how to create a business plan for the Chinese market that fits the potential for the Chinese market, that highlights the real challenges and obstacles you will see, because we all see it. I still see it after 17 years. but I know what they are, and I can actually predict when something might be popping up. And having someone offer that advisory to it. It's, you know, you can call it a mentor, you can call it a coach, you can call it whatever you like, but it's having this independent party sitting there and going through that and validating what you actually have to do from a step-by-step basis.
And adding on that one, you know, one thing it does is it aligns. The second thing it does is speeds up. The third thing it does, it reduces your risk. Because where I think Christina and me are probably different from certain global consulting organizations out there is, you know, we look at the people, and a 20 people team with an owner who's the manager needs something different than a 500 people organization that was just bought up by a Norwegian pension fund. Yeah. And you need
or even a one-person team that starts off.
Exactly.
They all need something different.
And you know, I just strongly believe if there needs to be a success case for the China story, you need to take that into account. There is no one size fits all. There is elements to the blueprint, but depending on who you are, what you're trying to do, you arrange these elements in a very different way. Maybe one organization is extremely organized, but in terms of flexibility, there are, you know, things missing. Whereas others, they're, you know, extremely flexible, but in terms of organization, processes, communication, and so on and so forth, you know, you have shortcomings. And this is where we step in and say, look, you know, we need to do something about this. It could be to change processes. It could also be to, you know, install people, because as Christina said, in April, we'll also be, you know, having something similar, especially for established organizations, where Jürgen will be joining the conversation. And I had talked with him the other day and said, like, you know, it's so often that the workflow processes, they don't work well enough, then you're not fast enough in China, and then you don't, you know, deliver on the customer quality, on the customer service, whatnot, and so forth. And then you're having a conversation with management and they're saying, why are we not growing the way we're supposed to grow? Well, look, folks, you know, if you're just on holidays in Germany or in the UK, and if you're just having, you know, oh, sorry, it's too late, I'll get back in 3 days' time. These are the details. And I guess this is where I'm very adamant about it. And I'm also very passionate about it, to get the details right. Because once we have the details sorted, once we know that the communication flow will be easy, will be quick, will be fast enough, you know, we're all good. Give you another example about why you should be doing that with us and not with other folks is that, look, everybody can give you an idea on which IT systems to implement. But if you start implementing IT systems that only work in China with a VPN, then that essentially means that none of your employees on the road can access them. Ooh, wow. You know, so you've just wasted a lot of time on a German IT company or service provider that gave you that advice. Maybe even worse, you implemented it, or a UK one, you implemented it. And then, because you're not aware of the fact that your Chinese team is not keen on telling you that you just made a huge mistake, it takes 6 months for you actually to find out that they can't use the software you implemented.
Well, I've got a better story.
Tell me.
Imagine importing 16 computers from your head office into China, having to declare customs, and realizing that those computers that have all of the headquarters software systems on it are not adaptable to the Chinese system, and that your finance team has no access to the online tax bureaus and has no way of gaining access to the online tax bureaus because of this computer that's been
Christina, imported. You win. Your story is
and you
better.
paid a fortune on it.
That is good. That is good.
So you have a finance team who's got a beautiful American imported computer on the left side, still their old Chinese computer where they're doing predominantly most of their work on. So there we go.
Absolutely. So, you know, again, I think kind of to try and sum it up, and then maybe to again switch to Christina and talk about her experiences when we did that workshop together, is a little bit about looking at where are we, is about developing a roadmap. It's not just, you know, that's not just from somebody who knows it in theory, but who's been there, who's done it, who's failed himself, to use all that experience to, you know, go into the roadmap, and obviously also use all the experience from other client projects that we're doing permanently, and then put it into action. And this is kind of our system. We have a lot of clients who they're actually very happy about it. And there's, especially when, you know, things are kind of stuck, the people are very, very happy about it. I mean, just before we went into this webinar, I had a China GM call me and say, you know, look, Manfred, what can you tell me again, what are we going to be doing in this workshop next week? Because I feel this is a good opportunity for me to kind of, you know, share my perspective, share my 2 cents, because again, you know, they're having an update interval of once in 2 weeks, which then sometimes gets canceled out. So it's, you know, down to once in a month, where, you know, it's not always a space for him to actually bring in his opinion, bring in his concerns, and so on and so forth. And so this is where, you know, as a neutral party, it's easy for us to kind of step in and to say, you know, sorry, we've heard now the perspective from headquarters, but can we please hear the China guy? Because after all, you know, he's the one who knows the market best. So I would love to hear his perspective, and then to bring that in, and then to weave it all together so that we have something that works for the headquarter as well as for the local market. And then I think you've got about a winning formula. So, you know, it's about the clarity in goal setting. It's to define the necessary steps. It's to protect against bad investment. And is also, in many cases, to simply accelerate. You know, if we would just move as fast as the Chinese market does, I would venture to say that in most of the cases would be at least 50% or twice as fast as we currently are as European organizations. And the funny thing is, you know, the only thing we have to do is not to be in the way. I personally don't believe that we need to do anything extraordinary in the European headquarters, but just get out of the way and let them do it. Here is, you know, to go more into detail on that one. But what I'd really love more to do is, Christina, we did this together, right? So maybe if you would like to share a little bit your kind of experiences with the folks listening in on this one. Sure. Yeah, I'd love to hear that one.
Maybe Manfred, can you go on the slide where you have what you're going to do in Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, because then I can use that as a bit of a guideline on my experience.
I don't think I have that right here at my fingertip now.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, I actually, as Manfred was explaining, so Manfred is a partner of Woodburn. Manfred's firm is a partner of our firm, and we collaborate a lot because there's just tremendous amount of synergies between what he does, what I don't do, what I do, and what he doesn't do. So we partner quite often in providing a full-end solution to companies. So when he was saying that he had developed this workshop, I said, oh, you know what, can I be a guinea pig on it and see what it's really all about and what it brings? Now, the first thing that I realized when we were starting to do the workshop was the fact that I do this on an annual basis. So I do create my goals for the next year. What do I want to achieve? And there may be 4 or 5 points that I highlight, from revenue, net profit, cutting down cost, headcount, and maybe a couple of others. So that was the first objective, was to say, well, Manfred, this is where I stand today. This is what my revenue level is, XYZ. This is what my net profit is. This is what my current headcount is. And this is where I want to be in 3 years. Okay. And I do that on an annual basis. I do that type of vision planning annually. So that was nothing new for me. What was new for me was having somebody to brainstorm with. Now, I'm an entrepreneur in China. I brainstorm with my brother, who's lovely, but he's my brother. And sometimes it gets a bit dull, which can happen also when you're sitting in a board of directors and you're surrounded by the same people constantly. You need to get fresh ideas. And what's nice is Manfred is also a service company. We, our challenges, both of our challenges and obstacles and opportunities are very similar. So it was nice in the area of looking at market opportunities, market challenges, to have somebody to brainstorm with. I highlighted what mine were. My challenge, quite frankly, is COVID related. There is a fear of people wanting to invest right now because their focus is on the headquarters surviving, and they're not sure if they can make a proper investment into the Chinese market. It is a real fear. It started for me in March 2020, and it's still continuing today. So this is my biggest market challenge that I do not have so much control over. Until then, Manfred highlighted and said, well, you can offer a lot of webinars to eliminate that fear so that people are aware they can still move on with their projects, but work with outside providers, not just me, a variety of them, to push the project forward in terms of people that are on the ground, okay? And it was just nice having that back and forth discussion with somebody, again, with fresh ideas. And actually, I just wanna highlight, since then, I have used my own personal network, my friends, to brainstorm now ideas more with, because my friends are in China. Majority of them have Chinese businesses. And I will have a Zoom meeting with them wherever they might be based in the world right now due to COVID, and say, can we have a 30-minute, 1-hour chat? I'd just like to bounce ideas off of you. And so that workshop tool has actually made me be more open about my business. I don't always reveal all the information to them in terms of numbers and whatnot, but it's a way for me to get ideas from others who might be in completely different sectors or similar service-oriented sectors, where I have this ability to brainstorm, share my challenges, but also share what my opportunities are and what how I can attack that, right? So that was a real eye-opener for me, because although I do have a solid ecosystem, I probably never used it to my advantage in terms of just talking to people about how to move forward. And this is something I think is the purpose of the workshop. It's not just a one-time workshop. It's something that actually I would probably call Manfred next year and be like, Manfred, can we have an hour chat? I want to tell you about my next 3-year goals and move that forward, right? It's something that ideally you are doing on a recurring basis by talking to independent people.
It's
to
funny.
give you the ideas.
It's funny that you're saying that, Christina, because this is exactly how our long-term clients have started to use it these days now. Because at the end of the day, it's you wanna review it, and partially it's also
Absolutely.
bringing in the new ideas, like especially now with COVID, so many kind of are just frozen.
Right.
But I think it was also in that, I believe it was in a workshop with you, but maybe it was with somebody else, where we said, look, but it's more and more that because China got out of COVID earlier, also that China, in many businesses these days now is the case, that China is contributing more than before the crisis to their global revenue. And actually many businesses, especially those well established in China, they tell me, look, if it wasn't for China at the moment, we would actually have to let go of people here in headquarters. So, it's very often it's simply also changing perspectives to see and understand and allow it, because sometimes, we have colleagues who they just don't allow that different perspective to sink in.
Right.
Or sometimes they don't accept it because it's coming from you, which, sometimes can also be a thing. If somebody else says the same thing, then it's got more weight than if it is coming from, for example, the boss, or from example, a long-term colleague, where you say, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think probably 2 things that I learned out of this is that one thing that I will definitely do differently from this time around is I will add certain team members of mine to join next time, because I would love to hear their opinions on what they feel are the challenges and opportunities in the market. And the second thing that I learned was that, during the process of doing this workshop with Manfred, and again, I was using it as being a guinea pig where I knew I answered, actually, we went through it very quickly because I already had all the data in my head and it was all there readily available. But it was also the fact that when we went down to the action plan, like, okay, Christina, what do you have to do next? Manfred was like, I think you need to talk to XYZ person because I think he can give you some insights into how to improve your marketing, your branding, and whatever else. And that's been advantageous, right? It's also working with independent advisors. And again, Manfred has developed this workshop and tool. You can find mentors and coaches to be able to go through this with you, right? What I'm trying to highlight here is just our advantages around it. And one of our advantages is being so long in the Chinese market is our ecosystem. So going through this workshop and tool, it really also shows where you need help. And that might be talking to other logistics providers. It might be the direction that you need to increase your amount of distributors and talk to more distributors. And it's then going into our ecosystem to see who do we know that can give you either directly that information or insights into where you can find that information. Because the whole point of going to business in China is you can't do it by yourself. You need this partnership and network of people that can guide you, whether that's logistics providers, marketing people, branding people, headhunters, accountants, whoever it might be. You need this network.
And the thing is, as always in life, you need the right ones. We're not talking about black and white. We're talking about 50 shades of gray. We're talking about, you're a rather small company with a very, very small budget. You will need other people to support you as if you're a large organization that is, having different issues. Right. And this is, I guess, where on one hand side, I think both Christina and me, we like it, we enjoy it, but maybe even more, I even take pleasure in it to kind of, have that experience and have that feeling and apply that to say, look, talk to those two or talk to those three to kind of make that pre-selection for you, because this is from our own perspective. This is why we developed the tool in the first place. The tool is not a place where you go and I sell something to you. That's not. I think it's also something that you enjoyed about it. The tool is specifically designed kind of to map your journey and to look at it. And this is where the sales aspect comes in. And I admit to that, because you get a lot of quality from that one, you'll come talk to me again. And this is specifically designed, in this way to kind of deliver quality to you so that there is an impact and that you can actually be clearer, faster, and more successful. And then obviously, one stays in touch and one is going to be talking again with each other.
Let me also just emphasize another benefit that I found and I think is invaluable, is that it can get overwhelming to see your ultimate goals in 3 years. You want to increase profitability by XYZ percentage. You want to reach a revenue of XYZ. You might even have, okay, let me get back to the, your 3-year goals might seem unachievable at this point in time. So the beauty of the workshop is also that you go into the breakdown of that. What are you going to do from either month to month or quarter to quarter to achieve those goals? Is that going to be a specific branding strategy? Is it going to be that you're going to add headcount? Is it going to be that you go from a big revenue number, and you break that down into what you need to achieve on a month-to-month basis in terms of monthly revenue? Is it going to be that you're going to start investing in machinery and equipment? Is it going to be that you are going to change your business model from contracting directly from headquarters? So let's say you have an entity in China and it's purely doing technical work and installation and spare parts business. And you decide, right, you know what, in 6 months, we're going to change that from direct contracts, headquarters China, to localizing everything, right? You're giving yourself this breakdown, this action roadmap again, you choose, right? It's up to you how you digest the information, whether you want to do it month to month where you have an action plan, or quarter to quarter. And that's the point of the workshop, is that you look at your goals, you look then at the challenges, opportunities, you break it down in what you need to achieve as a whole, and then you break that down even further into actual actionable steps that you can do, which basically means is you set up a company in China and you have actionable steps that you take from day one, actual actions, whether that's branding related, marketing related, finance related, HR related, whatever it might be, but you're not guessing. You know what you have to do to achieve the ultimate goal. It's a matter of you to making sure it gets done in quarter one, quarter two, or whatever it might be. And then most importantly, keeps you accountable, which is why we say you should be doing this on a recurring basis so that you are held accountable for it, right?
It's the accountability that you like so much, and it's the clarity that is also, necessary. Again, we acknowledge the fact that not everything in setting up China to be successful is easy, but I think the basis is there, that it's clear for everybody involved what needs to be done. And as Christina has highlighted here, and also after the workshop, like quite strongly, is, when you go check and maybe something gets delayed, at least you go back to that plan. You say, well, all right, is it still important? Let's change the timeline, and then, move on with it. So it's a very flexible approach, which I think we've also highlighted earlier on, that we both believe it's necessary to have that flexible approach, because, something that you planned, maybe you figure and you see that it's not necessary anymore, you take it out.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to switch back to my presentation, Manfred, and just finish off the presentation for today with a bit of a conclusion. And then I've actually written down notes that I also have a couple of questions I want to go through with you during the Q&A. So, what's the question you should be asking yourself? It's, what do we want you to achieve through the tool, right? And again, I want to highlight, yes, we are pitching this as something that we can offer to you, but ultimately what we're trying to highlight more than that is even if you do create your own business plan and strategy for China, have it evaluated or validated by external parties that can give you that added value and advisory that you will need when you go into the Chinese market. Because I've made my mistakes. I did them 15 years ago. I don't want you to make the same ones that I made, right? And they are the most typical ones that you would expect. So avoid those, because that's what's going to prevent you from growing in the first 3 years of being in the market. Okay, it's avoiding those typical obstacles or mistakes that foreign investors tend to make. So the first one is clarity, right? We want everybody, all the decision makers, whether they're based in China or based in the head office, to have clarity over the direction of the Chinese company and where it should be moving towards. We want transparency. And this is something that most foreign investors, when they start off in China, they do not have. And they don't have it because they don't establish the basic foundational systems, whether that's HR related, finance related, sales related, in terms of what type of discounts you should be offering or how to negotiate.
And this is extremely important, just to add in this one, just from a people perspective. What I see a lot and this is now years back when we did firefighting on the really big projects, it always started with distrust. And the distrust always started with not being informed. I don't know what my colleague in China does. This is where it starts. So this is why from my experience of, having seen the fires, having put on the gear of a firefighter, doing the firefighting, and I tell you, it's exciting and yet extremely tiring if something very, very big is burning. I tell you, take these small measures, these small steps to increase the transparency. Mm-hmm. The chances that you actually run into a huge fire, they will go down. They will go down extremely strong.
The next one is unity. So exactly what Manfred was highlighting, right? You want to have unity amongst your people. you want to all be striving for the same goal, right? So it has to happen obviously from upper level management, but it has to then trickle down into the actual operation of your business and amongst the people that are physically building up your business to grow in China. Accountability. Like Manfred highlighted at the beginning of the introduction to this presentation, to this webinar, was the fact that people always come to us and say, China's strategic. It's where we want to be. It's where we have to be. But then when it comes down to it, they always put it on the wayside and don't pay attention to it. The goal is to make you accountable for the objectives you want to reach and make sure that you reach them step by step in that three-year phase. The next is decision-making ability, because there are going to be fires that have to be fought. There are going to be moments where you're going to have to pivot your business. And you can't just sit there twisting your thumb saying, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? You have to be able to make decisions very quickly. But by having had this business plan and downsizing it into actionable moments will help you to make those decisions much, much faster when you do have to pivot or when there is an obstacle along the way. Consistency. My mantra for 2021 is momentum and consistency, particularly when it comes to branding and marketing, which is why I've automated a lot of my marketing functions, because I want to be at the top of people's mind when they think about China and China market entry and China incorporations. You need to do the same. You need to be consistent with your growth. You can't just say one day China's strategic and the next day it's not. What a waste of investment capital if you're going to have that mindset, right?
And also,
you're going to go in the Chinese market. Go ahead.
Sorry, Christina, to add, and also what a waste of management time. You know, as Christina said before, there's so much time and effort and thoughts and discussions going into all of that. You know, split it 50-50, take 50% for the preparation and then, you know, save 50% for actually implementing it and not just dreaming and talking about it.
Right. So consistency is key. Momentum is also key, right? You want to build on that momentum. So, you know, if you have, you know, you can break down your ultimate goals in a variety of ways, where you can say, I've got month-to-month goals I want to achieve, and that could be marketing related, HR related, finance related, or you could also just create a marketing strategy over a certain period of time, an HR strategy over a certain period of time. And one thing that I want to highlight regarding just something about HR strategies is, you know, my biggest pain point when I started off in China was that I was scared to fire people that were not, did not have the same vision as I had in growing my business. And I had that fear because I was scared of rocking the boat within my organization. And also then what would perception of my clients if I did have high turnover of staff. If you don't have someone on board who does not have the same vision as you or is slacking in any shape or form, that you don't have consistency and you're losing momentum, get rid of them. You know, there's no point in keeping someone on board that is actually going to sink the boat, basically. Because that one person leads to 2 people, leads to 3 people. And I think whenever I hear Manfred's stories about firefighting in China, it was always because, or it stemmed always because of people that were just not in the right direction. And that could have started for a variety of reasons. I don't want to get into that. But what I want to highlight here is, you know, if you have a bad egg, get rid of that bad egg, whether it's an employee, whether it's a distributor, whether it's a partner, whatever it might be. Have that exit strategy in place and don't have that fear.
And 2 things about that, especially if you are not extremely experienced, you know, go have a chat with people like Christina, with people like myself, with other people that you trust about, you know, when you're uncertain, point A. Point B, especially if you're starting up talking about momentum, you know, giving a twist on the people and on the sales side. You don't always need to do all the 18 months of preparation work that you know, kind of arrive to because you think you need to do all that planning and paper and so on and so forth. And to then just stall, you can also turn it around and say, look, we all understand in many cases it's having the right person. So, you know, Christina is offering an employer of record service. Use that, you know, go put a toe in the water, go have the right person, find that right salesperson to kind of see and test, and then establish these communication channels that you need in order to understand, is it or is it not? Right. And then, you know, you can do a phased investment. You don't need to earmark 100% with full unclarity. You actually earmark a small part of that. You employ one through Christina, have that person run and test and do it for whatever, 6 months, a year, 2 years. And then you have more clarity on the investment and on the return of it. And then that makes life much easier and also faster and more flexible.
Right. So, success story. Well, I think by now there are quite a few success stories that Manfred has dealt with. But I think one of them that I just want to emphasize, because it was a company that approached me initially and then I passed on to Manfred, is just a company that actually has already been transacting in China. So they're a startup. They've got a distributor on the market. And the dilemma that they have is that they don't feel the distributor is reaching the potential of the marketplace. And there were so many different opinions within the management, and predominantly when we say management, it's the APAC manager versus the owner of the organization.
And also the general manager, We have three completely different sets of opinions on the table.
On what to do next, right? Ultimately, what they, you know, in all of those scenarios in terms of ideas, it was, let's give the distributor that we don't like, that isn't achieving its market potential, more power, ultimately. And that's where, you know, both Manfred and I said, why would you do that? Would you do that in your head office? Would you give your distributor, who you're not happy with, more power to do things for you in China? Or would you actually look at other ways of doing the business separate from him or her in order to push the company forward? And when we said it in that way, you know, would you do this at home? I mean, that's a starting point for anybody. If you don't feel you would do that in your home jurisdiction, please don't do it in China.
Bend down.
Right? Because, I mean, don't make the assumption that, oh, in China, everything is so different. We're living in 2021, guys. It's not that different from the Western world.
Global village. It's a global village.
It's honestly, if you're not going to do something in your head office, don't do it in China. All right. So basically, what was the outcome of this company after doing this workshop and going back and the three individuals discussing with each other on the next steps is that they decided to actually, first of all, recruit a business development manager or sales manager, however you want to call that individual, have them employed through an employer of record service, and have him start evaluating new sales channels, not necessarily through distributors, could also be through other avenues, and giving it a 6-month trial to see then what the outcome of that is, and then developing, again, a step-by-step strategy, which is A, if it's successful, we will go ahead with the company setup. B, if it's not successful, we will extend for another 6 months. C, if the results are ridiculous or not at all what we want, fire the individual, reevaluate what we do then. So it was sort of this staged and phased plan of execution ultimately, but it gave them so much more security.
It gave them security, and what it really did to them, you know, they could finally breathe.
Yes.
Because they really, you know, all of them wanted to move. They just had different perspectives. So it was kind of in my role, I came in, I facilitated, I aligned, I put things together. And also I put things in different perspective so that simply, you know, they could finally change from being stuck to moving. And in that process of the moving, also to learn and see on how to proceed. And, you know, that's why I love doing that, because it's great to see getting people unstuck and moving. And move ahead. Yeah.
Super. So again, I mean, that's the end of the presentation. Basically, if you guys have questions, please insert them into the chat section of the control panel. There is one question that popped in during the presentation from Beata, which was, what does high speed mean for good brand management? Manfred, do you want to touch on that, or?
I'm just trying to check, is Beate still here with us, or? Okay, but anyhow, so high speed on good brand management, I guess it's also, you know, having the pulse on it. And I guess now I'm not sure about which kind of products you're dealing with or which services, but I guess one of the things that means is kind of maintaining a digital communication, and that I guess then is going into social media spheres, or to put it more singular and more simplistic, that means, you know, try and watch out for WeChat, try and stay in touch with your consumers through WeChat, and if something happens, you know, go and be proactive about it, and especially take into consideration that the Chinese expectation from customer service is higher than what I would perceive as the standard here in Europe or in Central Europe. So, you know, if you're just slow and if you're just kind of trying to play it like, oh, we'll wither it out and we'll not react, it's 2021, you know. As a European company these days in China, you've got to be careful what you're doing. There is a certain wave of nationalism that is washing the shores of China, and if you're not fast enough, you might end up being smashed by that.
Yeah, I think my 2 cents on getting high speed for good brand management. I mean, my first question will be, what's your financial resources on that? How much are you willing to spend on developing your brand in China? How much can you spend? In the webinar series we did in January, on the last day, one of the media service providers was saying that, you know, if you're doing B2C or even B2B, you're looking at a minimum investment for the first year of 20,000 euros or USD. Do you have that available? And that's just a starting point where you would build a e-reputation. You might be on 1 or 2 social media platforms, and that's it. And then obviously, if you've got more money to spend, you increase on that year on year on year. Just one thing that I want to highlight about brand management, and I was mentioning this case study to Manfred previously, is you can build a great brand in China, but there's no point building a great brand if you don't have your business operations set up accordingly. So one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen in 2020 is a client doing so much effort on brand management, going through the 11/11 campaign, which is the Singles Day campaign in November, and not having enough inventory on the ground, which was disastrous, right? So when we are talking about developing this workshop, or going through this workshop, it's analyzing the business from every aspect. Have you thought about everything? If you're building up the brand, do you have inventory on the ground? Do you have someone on the ground? I mean, you know, how to speed up the brand management could also be, you know, instead of outsourcing, hire a brand manager who works 100% full-time for you. And having this person sitting in China who's coordinating and dealing with all the social media platforms, building the reputation.
And especially,
there's so many avenues you can take.
And especially about going back to this thing that you said, Christina, about 11/11, the Singles Day, where you know, e-commerce sales are crazy these days in China. I'm sure somebody in the team must have seen it. So again, to come back to the basics, listen to your team, listen to them, ask for their opinion. You know, for sure, somebody has seen that coming and said, "Look, do we have this stuff?" Christina, you back? I'm not sure. I think I was gone there.
I think, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
I was gone myself, I think.
Okay.
So I would like to ask Manfred. Manfred, you highlighted a lot aspect, but when you're starting up in China and you hire that first person, you know, trust has to be gained. It's not going to come overnight. So what would be ways that, you know, the fact that we can't travel to China and have face-to-face meetings, can you give us, maybe to limit it, your top 3 suggestions on ways, if you have a company in China, you've hired someone, how would you gain that trust?
Simple communication. Don't make things complex. You know, is maybe a person that you haven't met with, or with a high probability a person you haven't met with. Take it like dancing. Start with small steps, get to know the partner, get a feel for them. The second thing is look at what they do. Don't look at what they say. If they say they do it and they did it, then, you know, you step up a little bit in the how much you trust them kind of thing. You don't step up when they say, I'm going to. You know, that is extremely important. And I think point number 3 is something that, especially for us Central Europeans, me being Austria, lived in the UK, but also dealing with a lot of German clients, is, you know, don't just go step by step. Look at the person. Accept and appreciate them as a person. Understand that they have a life outside their function of the job. Maybe they have kids, maybe they have a husband, maybe they have a wife, maybe their grandma, you know, is in a difficult health situation. You know, treat them as people. A lot of the magic with China happens when you start acknowledging them as people and talk about things other than work. And a lot of momentum, vice versa, is being killed if you just, you know, you start the call, you only talk about work, and then the work agenda is finished and you finish the call. I don't think that will actually, you know, let that the relationship develop. And it's, again, it's very simple, because I believe in simplicity, and I believe, especially in these times of COVID, you will need to have something that's simple to have a chance to actually work. If it's too complex, forget about it. It won't work.
Right. I don't have anything to add. I agree. Sorry.
I'm not sure, you know, it's,
I don't have anything else to add.
Give me too much time to think about
so
it.
I will say one of the biggest mistakes that I saw in 2020 during COVID was that I don't know if it was because of the distance or because people weren't used to having video conferences so often and so much, is that people did lose the human touch quite a bit. And, you know, COVID started off in China, and people just stopped communicating both ways, I will say. You know, just a simple, how are you? Are you okay? Where are you? Is everyone in your family fine? Just again, the simplicity and the basics of those questions, right? Or even just, you know, wishing someone a happy Chinese New Year takes you so far along. And it's literally just typing a message, right? The other thing I wanted to ask is the fact you've had this experience of firefighting, which is obviously with well-established companies in China. You know, you mentioned that, or I mentioned actually, that for me, when I hear these stories, the number one issue has been around people. Give us a couple of examples of what other issues could arise besides the people component.
Look, I think business is always a people aspect, right? It's the people who do business with each other. Yes, the contracts are from one organization to the other, but it's people thing. So I'll try to explore different aspects, but it will still be related. I think one of the things with China is simply that aspect about, you know, where is money flowing, and is it supposed to flow that way? Sometimes, again, you know, when you walk to China and it's very obvious that if you've got money in your pockets, somebody will be there to, you know, willingly accept it. And some of us, you know, just make that too easy when they go to China. They set up something, They put in, you know, a general manager, they trust them from the very beginning. There is no checks and balances for the accounts and so on and so forth. And then you don't care about the person. And then, you know, 18 months later, well, in theory, generally, if they want, they can. And if you fire them, again, if they want, they can. So I think it's just about this, you know, being careful and also making sure that you have checks and balances in place. That is one of the things. The other thing really, I think, is about understanding two things: understanding the customer and understanding that customer service is even more important in China, or generally speaking in East Asian countries, than it is in Central Europe. Which means pay a lot of attention to this. Pay a lot of attention to this. If you, which is very simple as a Central European, kind of give them the feeling that you don't care about them enough, then there will be, you know, bad feelings. And those bad feelings, they can spread very, very, very quickly. And I guess that has got to do with attitude. Again, that's got to do with, for example, if you're in e-commerce or in product business, it's also got to do with your team. You know, do we have a feeling for that? You know, do we have somebody who is picking up on these vibes and making sure that if you're in B2B and if you're in like huge, whatever kind of stuff that you're building, it means much more focus on relationship management than we would do here in Europe. I would also, you know, make sure that the UK or the Scandinavian project manager is treated well. But in China, I focus much more on it. And also on those above it, because otherwise I know that you know, things are wrong. And maybe a last one, and then I'll leave it at that, because there's so many points. Making sure that, especially when it's not a kind of a product, but when you're building something, always kind of contractual work, making sure that you understand what the other person needs. I see a lot of misunderstandings, and that misunderstandings come forth because there is not enough reflection that maybe the same term could mean something different to that person. You know the word kitchen. I know the word kitchen as well. And we both understand very well that the Chinese kitchen has got to look differently than the European one. And there's a lot of those examples out there that people believe that it's, you know, too simple to actually could be part of the problem. But you know that Confucius said that people, they stumble upon the small things and not upon the mountains that you see in the background, because it's the small things you don't pay attention to.
Fantastic. I think we're going to leave it there because we've definitely gone over. Yeah, and then people are slowly logging off. So I just wanted to highlight very quickly, you know, Manfred has highlighted that he's offering these workshops. If you're interested in reaching out to him, please do. I'd be happy to make an introduction, or I'm also going to copy Manfred on the email that I send out later today with the recording link. Otherwise, you know, Manfred also handles all type of executive search in a variety of different sectors. So if you are in need of people, again, that's how we collaborate quite often on projects as well. So definitely shout out to him. And last but not least, I'm just going to highlight again, we have one more webinar in this session about setting up a company in China. Tomorrow is all about registered office address, because I do think that is one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're trying to make decisions on where to be located in China. That can lead to so many legal and tax consequences for their businesses. So it's getting it right from the start. So if you're interested in signing up for that one, go to woodburnglobal.com/events. In the meantime, I'm just going to copy and paste again our contact details. So for those people that entered late, so that you will have it. One moment. And hold on. There we go. I've put it in the chat box again. So you have it. Don't forget to reach out to us if you need anything. Manfred, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, Christina. It's been a pleasure as always.
Super. I'm going to stop the recording now, and hopefully, and again, just a reminder, Manfred is joining us for next month's webinar series on how to analyze your China business by talking specifically on this bridge of communication. So
come on, and also tell your friends to come on.
Exactly.
Jürgen, very distinguished GM, very good, very capable, and the three of us will be having a bit of a conversation on this topic.
And all the events for next month's webinar series is already up on our website. So if you're interested in joining that, please do. So thanks a lot. Have a great afternoon or evening. Take care, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.